We go again. They can't stop. I keep telling y'all they cannot stop. A'ja Wilson wins Time Athlete of the Year. And rather than talking about herself, what does she want to do? She wants to down Caitlin Clark. She wants to downplay the impact and disrespect CC and the...
If A'ja Wilson were truly unbothered, none of this would have been said. That's the uncomfortable reality. Contentment doesn't need explanation. Security doesn't seek reassurance. And yet, throughout her comments about Caitlin Clark, both past and present, a consistent pattern emerges. From early discussions about privilege to subtle dismissals of Clark's impact, Wilson has repeatedly framed attention as something unfair rather than earned. That's not leadership. That's deflection. Caitlin Clark entered the league under intense scrutiny, physical play, harsh criticism, endless analysis. And through it all, she remained composed. She didn't lash out. She didn't blame veterans. She didn't accuse others of jealousy or unfair treatment. She showed up and played basketball. That's confidence. Confidence is quiet. It doesn't demand applause. It doesn't need to remind you of past accomplishments. It lets performance speak. Insecurity, on the other hand, is loud. It insists on recognition. It explains. It compares. Wilson's achievements are unquestionable, but her inability to enjoy them without comparison exposes an internal struggle, one that trophies can't resolve. This goes deeper than basketball. It's about identity. When your self-worth is tied entirely to accolades, someone else's spotlight feels threatening, even when it isn't. The league is big enough for multiple stars. It always has been, but that requires maturity, perspective, and emotional security, qualities that can't be won with championships.
A'ja Wilson, congratulations, won Time Athlete of the Year. Now, this would have been a great moment for A'ja Wilson to talk about her accomplishments, etc. But what did A'ja Wilson want to do? She wanted to take shots. She wanted to take...
The WNBA has once again placed a crown on A'ja Wilson's head, officially recognizing her dominance at the top of the sport. On paper, this should have been a flawless victory lap, a moment reserved entirely for celebration, reflection, and pride. Time magazine naming her the 2025 Athlete of the Year is no small honor. It's the kind of recognition most athletes chase their entire careers and never reach. And yet, instead of letting the moment remain purely about her historic achievements, something unexpected happened. Rather than simply soaking the accomplishment, Wilson chose to redirect attention, subtly but deliberately, toward Caitlin Clark. That decision alone is what makes this moment so revealing. When you're standing at the absolute peak of your profession, with trophies stacking up and records falling behind you, why feel the need to bring up someone else at all? That's the question that refuses to go away. Wilson has already secured nearly everything the game can offer. Championships, MVPs, scoring titles, defensive honors. Her resume is not just impressive, it's historic. So when someone with that level of success shifts focus away from themselves during a defining career moment, it naturally raises eyebrows. Because confidence, real confidence, doesn't require comparison. It doesn't need contrast to exist. This wasn't a casual mention or an innocent aside. It was a calculated choice made on one of the biggest media stages in sports. Time magazine isn't a post-game press conference, it's legacy media. Words spoken there carry weight. And instead of reinforcing her greatness alone, Wilson allowed another name to enter her victory speech, whether intentionally or not. That creates a contradiction. If you truly believe your accomplishments stand on their own, you don't feel compelled to frame them against someone else's popularity or media attention. You don't need to remind the world of what you've done. The work already speaks. And that's what makes this situation fascinating. The more accolades Wilson collects, the more her comments suggest that external recognition still isn't enough. It's as if something continues to bother her beneath the surface, something that trophies can't silence. When athletes repeatedly highlight their own greatness or redirect conversations toward perceived rivals, it doesn't project dominance. It exposes discomfort. The irony is unavoidable. This was her moment, a moment she earned, a moment that could have been remembered as pure excellence. Instead, it became a conversation about comparison, insecurity, and the psychology of greatness. So here's the real question. When someone constantly reminds you how accomplished they are, is that confidence or is it the opposite? Does true self-belief demand an audience, or does it exist quietly, without explanation? That's the discussion worth having.
Into it, and it seems like there's some paragraphs from this article that put down Caitlin Clark in order to prop up A'ja, which is crazy because if you guys remember, Caitlin Clark was Time's sport.
Here's the final truth that no one wants to say out loud. You can have everything, titles, awards, records, and still feel incomplete. A'ja Wilson's Time magazine interview proves that external success doesn't automatically create internal peace. Caitlin Clark possesses something that can't be manufactured, a connection with fans, a magnetism, a style of play that draws people in, even those who've never watched women's basketball before. That's not privilege, that's impact. Clark doesn't call herself the GOAT. She doesn't diminish others. She doesn't campaign for validation. She plays, she competes, she endures criticism without complaint. That contrast is impossible to ignore. Time magazine attempted to frame Clark as a divisive figure, but she didn't create division. The division came from insecurity, from resentment, from the inability to accept that attention can grow without replacing anyone. Acknowledging Clark's impact doesn't erase history. It extends it. Aya Wilson had a historic season. She deserved celebration, but using that platform to take subtle shots revealed more than intended. Real champions don't need to explain why they're great. They simply are.
In 2024, Caitlin Clark's rookie season helped the WNBA hit milestone TV and attendance figures, but Clark's emergence created a toxic, racially divisive narrative that she was almost singularly responsible for salvaging a league whose foundation had been built by a mostly Black player base. I'm going to stop right there because, like I said, Caitlin Clark was Time Sportsperson of the Year last year, and in that article, she was asked multiple times about these narratives around Caitlin and the racial divide that happens in America, and specifically around women's basketball. It has gotten so insane, and she has denounced it so many times. She said it in the Times article that she doesn't want her name to be used for these different negative and divisive things that it's used for, and the fact that Time magazine named her Sportsperson of the Year in 2024, and then in 2025 turn around and put something like this in an article, by the way, you guys, that is supposed to prop.
There's one final layer to this story that deserves serious attention because it explains why this entire situation feels so uncomfortable to watch. It's not about stats. It's not about rings. And it's not even about Caitlin Clark specifically. It's about control over narrative, legacy, and relevance. For years, Aya Wilson has been the unquestioned face of dominance in the WNBA. Coaches game planned around her. Opponents feared her presence in the paint. Media recognized her excellence, but the attention remained largely within basketball circles. Then Caitlin Clark arrived, and something fundamentally shifted, not in talent hierarchy, but in visibility. Suddenly, games were pulling record viewership. Arenas were selling out. Casual fans, people who hadn't followed the league before, were tuning in specifically to watch one player. That kind of attention changes ecosystems. And when ecosystems change, those who once controlled the spotlight often feel threatened, even if their performance hasn't declined at all. This is where Wilson's frustration truly comes from. Not because Clark is better, not because her accomplishments are invalid, but because attention is no longer centralized. And when attention spreads, influence feels diluted. The uncomfortable truth is this: dominance on the court doesn't guarantee dominance in culture. And that's something many elite athletes struggle to accept. You can be the best player in the league and still not be the most watched. You can have the strongest resume and still not be the most talked about. That doesn't make the attention undeserved. It makes it different. Caitlin Clark represents a shift in how fans engage with women's basketball. Her shooting range, creativity, and fearless style translate easily to highlight culture. That doesn't erase the league's history. It builds a bridge to new audiences. Growth always looks threatening to those who benefited from the old structure. And here's where leadership matters. True leaders recognize moments of transition and guide the narrative forward. They say, this is good for the game. They uplift. They expand the tent. They don't frame attention as a zero-sum competition. Wilson had the perfect opportunity to do that. A Time magazine cover, Athlete of the Year, a global platform. She could have been the voice of unity, legacy, and evolution. Instead, the interview carried undertones of resentment and defensiveness. That doesn't erase her greatness, but it complicates her image. Caitlin Clark, meanwhile, continues doing the simplest thing possible, playing basketball. She doesn't ask for protection. She doesn't demand praise. She absorbs criticism and keeps moving forward. That restraint is rare, and it's powerful. In the end, this isn't about who deserves more credit. It's about mindset. One player is trying to protect a throne. The other is just playing the game. And history has shown us repeatedly. Fans gravitate toward authenticity, not insecurity. Toward confidence that doesn't speak, but shows. That's the difference on full display.
I always have had really good perspective on everything that's kind of happened in my life, whether that's been good, whether that's been bad. And then obviously coming to the WNBA, like I've said, I feel like I've earned every single thing that's happened to me over the course of my career. but also I grew up a fan of this league from a very young age. Like, my favorite player was Maya Moore. Like, I know what this league was about. And like I said, like, it's only been around 25 plus years. So I know there's been so many amazing Black women that have been in this league, and continuing to uplift them, I think, is very important. And that's something I'm very aware of. And like I said, like, I try to just be real and authentic and, share my truth. And I think that's very easy for me. Like, I'm very comfortable in my own skin. And that's kind of been how it is.
Let's be absolutely clear from the start. Aya Wilson's achievements are real, historic, and deserving of recognition. Time magazine naming her the 2025 Athlete of the Year is not charity, hype, or coincidence. It's a result of a season that statistically and competitively places her in rare company. Championships? Secured. MVP awards? Collected. Defensive Player of the Year? Earned. Scoring titles? Claimed. Her resume reads like a checklist of basketball immortality. In fact, her accomplishments stretch beyond the WNBA alone. Wilson became the first player in league history, men's or women's, to simultaneously win a championship, finals MVP, league MVP, defensive player of the year, and the scoring title in a single season. That's not just impressive. That's unprecedented. She also reached 5,000 career points faster than anyone before her. By any measurable standard, this was a legendary run. And yet, despite all of that, her Time magazine interview didn't feel like a celebration. It felt defensive. Instead of focusing entirely on her journey, her growth, her dominance, the conversation drifted. Caitlin Clark's name entered the discussion, bringing with it narratives about media attention, privilege, and history being temporarily erased. That shift matters because when you're standing on top of the mountain, you don't usually look sideways. You look forward or you look back with gratitude. Wilson even compared herself to Thanos collecting infinity stones, a metaphor meant to emphasize her dominance. But dominance doesn't need metaphors. It doesn't need explanation. It simply exists. And the moment you start explaining why your greatness should be acknowledged, you unintentionally weaken its impact. What made this moment feel off wasn't self-confidence. It was self-consciousness. There's a difference. Confidence celebrates achievement without anxiety. Self-consciousness demands recognition and fears being overshadowed, even when there's no real threat. The truth is, Wilson had every opportunity to turn this interview into a masterclass in leadership. She could have highlighted the women who built the league before her, shared lessons from her journey, and inspired the next generation without comparison or complaint. Instead, the conversation became about narratives, resentment, and perceived slights. That doesn't erase her accomplishments, but it reframes them, because greatness isn't just measured by statistics. It's also measured by how you carry yourself when the spotlight is brightest. This was her moment, and rather than letting it stand untouched, she complicated it.